Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Lunch and Learn. My name is Sarah Scholl. I am the Outreach and Public Relations Coordinator for PPFF. And today we'll be talking about ticks, tick prevention, Lyme disease, and other tick-borne illnesses. If at any point during the presentation you have any questions, please feel free to comment in the comment box below, and we'll get to those questions as we go. With us today, we have Karen Poe, Post-Doctorate Scholar in the Department of Entomology at Penn State University, specifically Penn State Extension, and Bill Moore, a board member of the PA Lyme Resource Network and leader of the Pittsburgh Lyme Disease Support Group. Karen and Bill, welcome to you both.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, Karen, we're going to let you kick us off today to talk about ticks and tick prevention. So go ahead and take it away, Karen.
All right, let me go ahead and share my screen real quick.
Wonderful.
Okay, well, I just want to say thank you, everyone, for being here today and joining us on our webinar. So I know since we're in quarantine, we're probably spending a lot of time outdoors just to get some fresh air since we're typically stuck at home or working from home. But ticks are still going to be out there. COVID means nothing to ticks. So we're going to talk to you today about a little bit about tick biology and how we can use some of that tick biology, some of that knowledge in order to prevent ticks from biting us and to help protect you and your family as you go outdoors. So up until recently, ticks have actually been in the news quite a bit with things such as Powassan virus coming into the scene, and with Senator Kay Hagan's death caused by Powassan virus. This really put ticks quite a bit in the news, and this is with good reason. Overall, tick bite rates have been increasing in about the last 30, 40 years. We didn't have as many ticks as we probably have now. Not only do we have to worry about ticks that are currently here in Pennsylvania, we also have to worry about ticks that are possibly moving into Pennsylvania, some of these invasive species. And so not only do we have to contend with these invasive species, but we still have to be quite vigilant about some of the ticks that we find here in Pennsylvania as well. But just like tick bite rates are increasing, so are the number of cases of tick-borne diseases as well. Between 2004 and 2017, we pretty much saw tripling in the number of cases that have been reported that have been caused by tick-borne diseases. And even between 2016 and 2017, we see that there was about 10,000 more cases that were reported in 2017. So in order to kind of protect ourselves from these ticks, it's important that we make a few observations about their biology to help protect us. So a few important points I do want to bring up are that ticks are everywhere, whether we like it or not. We also have many different species out there. In Pennsylvania, we have about 20 species of ticks, but the three that we are probably most concerned about are on the screen right now. And of course, control and tick-borne disease risk will also depend on the species, because many different species can carry many different diseases. But luckily, not all ticks carry the same diseases, but they can carry other different pathogens. So the three ticks that we're probably most concerned about in Pennsylvania are going to be the black-legged tick, or Ixodes scapularis, that's down here in the lower right. This is probably the most common tick that's here in Pennsylvania, and probably the one you're most familiar with. This one actually does transmit the pathogen that causes Lyme disease. Other ticks that are found in Pennsylvania include the American dog tick, or Dermacentor variabilis, and the Lone Star tick, Amblyomma americanum. So the Lone Star tick is typically found in the south, and it is making its way up into the northeast. Currently, we find this tick in the southern state, or the southern counties of Pennsylvania, but they are making their way into the northern regions as well. So while these ticks are probably the most common ticks that we'll find here in Pennsylvania, there are other ticks that can literally be found everywhere, such as the brown dog tick. This has been found pretty much in every state in the United States, but some other ticks are more confined to certain areas of the United States, such as the Gulf Coast tick, as well as the Rocky Mountain wood tick. And so, as you can see, as scientists, we're not really creative in how we name things. So on the black-legged tick, for example, that one actually has black legs. So, and then these other ticks, they are named after the regions that they're found in. But with these many different species, we also have to worry about the many different behaviors that they have, because that will actually help us in identifying different control measures for these ticks. So while it's important that you know how to ID ticks, that's not really your job as a public to do that. For me, that is one of my jobs, is to help identify ticks out there. Because again, they will have different behaviors and therefore different controls. So let's talk a little bit about tick biology. We'll just talk about the life cycle real quick. So for the ticks that we're worried about here in Pennsylvania, they follow a general rule of the 2-3-4 rule. These ticks will have a 2-year life cycle. They will feed on 3 hosts throughout their life, and these ticks will have 4 life stages. So looking at this figure on the right side of the screen, we can kind of just go through this and talk about the life cycle real quick. So first off, we have the eggs. This is within our first year. In the spring, the eggs will hatch, and the larva stage, which is the second stage that we're at, the larvae will feed on small mammals typically, or birds, and they'll feed on them throughout the summer and the fall, and then they'll overwinter, and in the next spring, they will emerge as a nymph. So the nymph is the third stage of the tick. Well, now in our second year, and the nymphs will then take a second blood meal, and then they'll feed on these different hosts throughout the spring and the summer, and then in the fall, the adults will emerge, and these adults will typically feed on quite large mammals, including humans, but mostly on deer. And then the adults will mate, and then the female will overwinter and lay her eggs in the spring, which will hatch and start this cycle over again. So I do have the adults and the nymphs start, because these are the ones that are, or these are the stages that are considered infective, because they can carry different pathogens that can be transmitted to us, and they can also feed on us as well, thereby transmitting many of these pathogens. So we will consider the nymphal stage to be the most dangerous stage, because it's about the size of a poppy seed, so it's very easy to miss them on our bodies. I know when working with ticks in the lab, I sometimes find a nymphal tick going missing, and it's quite hard to actually find them. So nymphs are about the size of a poppy seed, while adults are about the size of a sesame seed. So it's really important that when you're doing tick checks, you check pretty much everywhere for any of these ticks. And we'll talk about tick checks in a couple of slides. All right, so it's also very important that you understand that ticks have a 2-year life cycle. So just because you control the adults in the first year, you still have to control the adults within the second year that emerge in the second year as well. So not only do your control plans have to be continuous, they also have to be planned as well. It's also important to know when some of these life stages are also active. So if you want to control the adults, for example, you probably want to aim for the fall or the early spring. For the nymphs, typically around the early summer and throughout the rest of the summer as well, and same with the larvae as well. I will point out that the larval stage is not considered an infective stage. When they hatch from their eggs, they're typically pathogen-free. It's typically when they pick up a pathogen from a white-footed mouse, for example, that the white-footed mouse can actually carry the pathogen that causes Lyme disease. So once that larva picks it up, it can then transmit it throughout the different stages in its next stages, excuse me. All right, so like I said before, many different ticks can carry many tick-borne pathogens. And again, the one that we're probably most worried about is Ixodes scapularis, or the black-legged tick, because this is the only tick that can carry Borrelia burgdorferi, which causes Lyme disease in humans. So I'll save the Lyme disease stuff for Bill's presentation. But what I will say is that Lyme disease and its range has expanded over the last 20 or 30 years. In 1996, we barely saw that many cases from Lyme disease, but in 2017, we see a huge explosion in these cases all over the Northeast, as well as heading into the Midwest. In fact, in 2018, about 10,000 cases were reported to the CDC for Lyme disease. So because many different ticks can carry many different diseases, it's important that we kind of protect ourselves, that we actually take active measures to protect ourselves. And when we think about encountering ticks in the environment, we typically think of things such as the forest or the woods, and you're not wrong. This is very much correct. So activities such as hiking or hunting, or even if your kids are playing in the woods, ticks can be found in these different areas. And this is what we probably think of when we think of a typical tick habitat. But what you don't know is that we can also encounter ticks in our daily life. Some ticks can be found within people's yards. Sometimes they can be found inside homes if you accidentally bring a tick home. But you can also encounter them in things such as farming or even just doing your yard work. So I want to introduce the topic of integrated pest management because this is the control measure where we combine a number of different control measures together, hence the name integrated, to control tick populations and reduce our risk of tick bites. So there are 4 main pillars of integrated pest management. We have cultural or behavioral changes that we could do, that we could change about our own behavior to prevent our risk for tick bites. Then we have mechanical and physical changes to the landscape. We also have biological controls as well as chemical controls, which is probably what we're most familiar with the parasites or pesticides that we could use to kill ticks. So the whole goal of integrated pest management is not to rely just on one pillar. What we want to do is actually take a little bit from each of these pillars and combine them together to create a control plan to control ticks in the landscape. So we'll talk about some personal protective measures. This is what we consider cultural protection. What you can do is you can wear light colored clothing that will actually let you see ticks on your clothes a lot easier. Wearing long sleeves and pants is also ideal because this actually prevents ticks from coming in contact directly with your skin. You can also wear repellents. So any CDC repellents or CDC recommended repellents, such as DEET, is recommended. But if you sometimes forget to wear repellent, like sometimes I even forget to wear or to bring my repellent with me, you can actually treat your clothes with permethrin. So you can either buy it manufactured clothes that actually spray the permethrin on the clothing, or you can actually treat your own clothes. So this bottle, for example, from Sawyer, this is actually permethrin. You can actually spray it on your clothes, and ticks, when they come in contact with your clothes, they will die from the permethrin. Good hygiene is also another measure that you can take to prevent tick bites. So going into the shower or showering within 1 or 2 hours of coming back from the outdoors, that can actually get rid of ticks that are on you but haven't necessarily attached to you yet. Showering is also a great time to actually do a tick check as well. And in a couple of slides, I'll talk about some certain places that you should check on your body for any of these ticks. And then throwing your clothes into a hot dryer, so turning your dryer on high for about 10 minutes and putting your clothes in there, that will actually kill any ticks because that will actually desiccate or dry out the ticks, because the humidity is actually what keeps the ticks alive. So throwing your clothes into the hot dryer for about 10 minutes on high heat can actually kill some of those ticks that are on your clothes. So here's a list of some CDC recommended repellents. What they recommend is that you use repellents that have active ingredients, including DEET, picaridin, oil of lemon eucalyptus, or IR3535. So these have different lengths of duration. And so you kind of have to think about the activities that you're doing outdoors and how long you're going to be outdoors, because that will determine how often you're going to be reapplying. So if you're outdoors for maybe 2 hours, maybe something like IR3535 might be ideal for you. But if you're going to be outdoors for 15, 16 hours a day, then maybe DEET might be better, because you only have to reapply once, because DEET can last for about 8 to 10 hours depending on the concentration. So if you want something that lasts a little bit longer, just take a look at the percentage. That will tell you how concentrated the repellent is with the active ingredient. And that the higher the percentage, that typically means a longer duration. So when you do tick checks for yourself, you want to look around places such as in and around your hair, and really anywhere ticks can actually hide, where it's like nice and humid on our body. So typically under our arms or around our waist. Inside the belly button is actually a really fun place for ticks to hide, and even back behind the knees and in between your legs as well. Tick checks don't have to stop at just us. We can also check our pets that go outdoors as well. So checking between the toes is really important, because ticks actually tend to hide between the toes, and looking underneath the legs as well, and then around the face, typically under the collar is actually a really great place for ticks to hide as well. So if you actually do happen to find a tick, the easiest and most effective way to remove a tick is actually just by using a pair of tweezers. So what you want to do is you want to take your tweezers and grab as close to the mouth parts as possible in order to get the mouth parts out from the skin. And so because the mouth parts are actually inside of you as the tick is feeding, you want to grab as close to the skin as possible with your tweezers. So you want to grab within this blue circle. Do not grab in the nose squeeze zone, which is basically any of the legs or the main body. What you want to do is you want to get as close to the skin as possible with your tweezers and just pull straight out. Try not to squish or twist the tick, because this can actually agitate the tick, and this can actually make them regurgitate their gut contents into you, and sometimes those gut contents may contain a pathogen that can cause certain diseases. So if you're going outdoors for long periods of time, or if you regularly go outdoors, we recommend that you bring a tick removal kit with you. It can be completely DIY. The bare minimum that you'll need will be fine point tweezers. You'll also need alcohol pads or antiseptic swabs and antiseptic creams. as well as a bandage in case the wound that the tick left is quite large. And so you can also include other things such as a Ziploc bag and a pen or marker to kind of mark where you found it and when you found it as well. And then you can use that information if you ever bring this tick to a doctor or if you ever want to get it tested for different pathogens. All right, so the sooner that you remove a tick, the better your chances are of a pathogen not getting transmitted to you. So typically pathogens can get transmitted within about 36 hours after the tick has started feeding on you. So removing it as soon as you see the tick is key to preventing many of these pathogens. All right, so for mechanical and physical controls, this typically refers to landscape management, so eliminating tick habitats such as getting rid of wooded or brushy areas, as well as getting rid of leaf litter are pretty great ways to get rid of tick habitat. You can also eliminate host habitats. So ticks typically feed on, or at least the black-legged tick, that one will feed on white-footed mice as well as white-tailed deer. So to control the white-footed mice, getting rid of rock walls, for example, where mice can get into the nice little crevices and make little nests. Getting rid of those potential habitats, and then putting up a deer exclusion fence may also be another option to exclude deer from your yard in order to reduce any adult ticks from falling into your yard. All right, so for chemical control, we have acaricides, which are typical pesticides that we think of when we want to get rid of ticks. So these can be quite effective. However, there are environmental ecological consequences of using some of these acaricides because they can be toxic to beneficial insects and other non-target wildlife as well as aquatic wildlife as well. So we also have natural acaricides. However, there's also some evidence of non-target mortality, and efficacy data is quite limited for some of these natural acaricides as well. And we can also use chemical controls with host-targeted control. So one of these measures includes using tick tubes. These are sold by Thermacell. It basically looks like a little toilet paper roll, and it's stuffed with cotton that that's been soaked in permethrin. And what will happen is when you put these out, the white-footed mice, which you can see in this picture, the white-footed mice will take the cotton for their nests, and the permethrin in the cotton will kill any ticks on that mouse, as well as treat their little nest, as well as any pups within the nest of these ticks. So the permethrin will kill the ticks in many different ways, on the mouse as well as any within their nests. So unfortunately, though, there is evidence of some permethrin leaching. So that is something to be concerned about. So we also have another option, which is a bait box. So the bait box also focuses mostly on the mouse, and what the box contains is a bait that will attract the mouse, and as the mouse is feeding on the bait, they will get treated with fipronil, and the fipronil will kill any ticks that are currently feeding on the mouse. Unfortunately, though, bait boxes are quite expensive. They're about $40 a box, so you need about 20 boxes to cover 1 acre of land. In addition, you also need some knowledge of mouse habitats, and so to apply these bait boxes on your land, you need to actually use a certified pesticide applicator, so they need to come out to your house and actually place these boxes in your yards as well. So there are some cons using some of these different methods, but again, the whole idea of IPM is to use a combination of many of these different methods together to control tick populations as well as reduce your risk for tick bites. And so the main takeaways from my talk are that you need to put up a really great defense. And in order to do that, you can wear light-colored long layers, as well as use any repellents. Use the power of IPM. It's a very powerful tool to control ticks out there. Watch out for nymphal and adult ticks, because remember, those are the stages where they are able to pass any pathogens to you. If you do find a tick attached to you, you can actually submit it to East Stroudsburg University at ticklab.org, and they will test the tick for Pennsylvania residents for free. And they will be testing for different pathogens, not just Borrelia burgdorferi or anything like that. They will test a slew of different pathogens for you. If you have any flu-like symptoms and you are out in the woods or brush lately, keep track of your symptoms and go to the doctor and relay any recent activities. And if you do find a tick on you, bring that tick with you, because that will help the doctor identify the actual disease that you might have. Because many of these different tick-borne diseases actually have very similar beginning stages. So it's typically flu-like symptoms. So bringing the tick can actually narrow down the list of potential diseases that you might have. All right. So if you have any questions, feel free to either email me or reach out to me on Twitter, or you can leave them in the live comments. That's pretty much it for me. So thank you for coming to the webinar or listening to this part of the webinar.
Thank you so much, Karen. That was a great presentation. Just a couple questions before we move on to Bill, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
We had someone comment that they found 20 ticks on themselves after a hike on Saturday. So do you or your colleagues have any idea of what the population is going to be like this summer? Like, is that a normal number for this time of year, or?
Yeah, so it really depends. I think since we had such a mild winter, I wouldn't be surprised if we do have a lot of ticks. As we're going out tick dragging right now, we're actually finding quite a bit of ticks out there, especially on trails. Like even like the main goal is actually to tell people to stay on the trails and not go off trails when you're hiking. But even on the trails, we actually see quite a few ticks on there. For finding about 20 ticks in a certain forest, that's quite a lot. That is some indication that we probably will have a pretty high tick population this next year or so.
Okay.
So, bummer. So I hope you were able to pick off all the ticks after your hike. So good for you, though, for doing a tick check and actually picking them off.
Absolutely.
There's some people who don't. They're like, well.
Yeah. One more question for you, Karen. In addition to light colored clothing and long sleeve pants, how would you suggest someone remove those poppy seed or sesame size ticks? Deborah's inquiring about a sticky roller. I'm not sure if it's specific. Okay, so.
Yeah, so I think when you say sticky roller, I think I'm thinking of a lint roller, and that's actually a pretty good idea. So when we actually have really high populations of ticks on our drag, for example, when we go sampling for ticks, we actually just use like a lint roller and just kind of go over it just to pick up as many ticks as we can at once. So if you have a really like large number of ticks, that works pretty well. But if you only have one on you, then it's like, well, I just rolled all this for no reason. But that's not to say that the lint roller is not useful. I think that's actually a really great way to find some ticks on you.
Great. Thank you so much, Karen. Really appreciate your time and expertise. And now we will be turning things over to Bill Moore of PA Lyme Resource Network. Bill, take it away.
Well, thank you, Karen. I really enjoyed your part of the presentation.
Thanks.
Please bear with me while I try to share my presentation.
Here we go. See? All right.
Okay. Are we good now?
Yes, sir. Go on ahead.
Okay. All right. My name is Bill Moore, and I'm with PA Lyme Resource Network. And PA Lyme Resource Network is a all-volunteer organization that has support groups across the state of Pennsylvania. And we're involved with, obviously, support groups and providing support for people that are affected by Lyme disease. But we also are heavily involved with the education and prevention side of it, because that is the best way to deal with Lyme disease, to prevent being bit by a tick, prevent getting any of the bad things that the tick has, is definitely the best way to go. So I am a board member with PA Lyme Resource Network. I am the leader of the Pittsburgh Lyme Disease Support Group that meets in Monroeville, and I am a certified facilitator for this program. Just a quick medical disclaimer: if I say anything that sounds like I'm giving medical advice, I am not. I am not a medical professional. I am not. PA Lyme does not give medical advice, so anything that you hear, you should definitely check with a medical professional before getting any type of medical treatment. So, you've done everything you could. You've listened to Karen's advice, and you've taken all kind of prevention measures. You've sprayed your shoes and socks and your clothes with permethrin. You've put repellent on your bare skin. You've avoided tick habitat to the best of your ability, and you've done tick checks and taken a shower when you came back in. However, you still managed to get bit by a tick. So we're going to talk about the correct way to eliminate a tick. And Karen did cover this in her presentation as well. But the correct way to remove a tick is to grasp it with a pair of tweezers, or actually in the next slide I'll just show you some other tools you can use other than tweezers. But if tweezers is what you have, you want to get that tick as close to the bottom, to the mouth parts as you can. Grasp him as close to the head as you can. Do not squeeze the body, because that's when the tick, you would take the contents of whatever's in the tick, and if he's got Lyme disease or some other pathogen in his body, it would get pushed into you. So you definitely don't want to squeeze the body. You want to pull the tick straight out. You want to be as quick as you can. I mean, you don't want to be in a big rush that you mess it up, but you want to get that tick out as quick as you can. It's kind of like a sneak attack on the tick. You don't want to agitate him. Once he realizes he's losing his meal, he's going to get agitated, and that's when he would tend to regurgitate back into your body. So get him low, pull him out as quick as you can. Clean the area with an alcohol wipe. Watch for signs of infection. It's a good idea to take a picture at this point. And the things you do not want to do is to twist the tick, burn the tick, squeeze his body, put anything on him, including petroleum jelly or any other thing that you may have heard that you could put on the tick and he'll come out. Some of those things might be true, but what's also true is if you agitate that tick, he's going to tend to regurgitate. So some other tools you can use other than tweezers, this Pro Tick Remedy, it's like a little scooper. It's got a little slot that you can slot under the tick. It's really good. So we would recommend that. This tick check card is something you can get on Amazon, but it also has two little slots, one for a larger adult size tick, one for the smaller nymphal size tick, and it's also got a little magnifying glass built in. So what do you do with the tick? Keep him. Put him in a bag with a moist cotton ball and save it. Don't flush it down the toilet. Ticks don't drown. They don't have lungs, so they don't drown. That's why they could sometimes survive the washing machine, but they can survive the toilet, and you don't want the tick surviving and coming back out. So don't flush him down the toilet. If you are going to discard him, put it in something sealed so that he can't ever get back out. But our recommendation is to save it for tick testing, which we'll cover in a bit. So you've saved the tick, and now you're monitoring for symptoms. If symptoms do arise, where do you send the tick for testing? Well, it's a no-brainer at this point. You want to send it to www.ticklab.org, which is East Stroudsburg University, but it is free tick testing offered by the state of Pennsylvania. So for 2 years now, we've had free tick testing, and people like free things, and this is really great that Pennsylvania offers this. With that free tick test, you'll get, and they're smart people. Obviously, they know what they're looking for. For the black-legged deer ticks, they'll be looking for pathogens that are only carried in the black-legged deer tick, which is Lyme disease, anaplasmosis, babesiosis, and the Powassan virus. For non-deer ticks, they'll have a different set of pathogens that they're looking for. But turnaround time is quick, and Bartonella testing is available for an additional fee. So what do you do with that tick test report when you get it? Keep the report and provide it to your doctor. Tick testing is extremely accurate. It's 99.9% accurate, whereas the test that a person could have for Lyme disease, it can be very inaccurate. Some some reports say it's up to 40% inaccurate. So, and it depends on how long you wait to have the test. But anyway, you definitely, it's better to test the tick. It's definitely much more accurate than actually doing a medical test on a person. So keep the report, provide it to your doctor. Keep track of any symptoms that you're having. If you have symptoms, positive results should be discussed as a potential cause with your physician. Obviously, if you got bit by the tick and you start having symptoms after that, it's pretty reasonable to conclude you've gotten some sort of disease from the tick. But it can go either way. The tick can be positive for Lyme disease or something else, but if you got the tick off in time, perhaps there's a possibility that that tick is not going to transmit the Lyme disease to you. Catching tick-borne disease early. This is something we really want to drive home. Lyme disease is one disease you don't want to mess around with. You do not want to wait and see if your body's going to fight it on its own. You want to catch it early. You want to deal with it early. If you catch Lyme disease and get it treated early, chances are very good that you'll make a full recovery. But if you let it linger around and let it go untreated, you could end up with a life-changing chronic illness that you definitely don't want. So what are the early symptoms of Lyme disease? That bullseye rash on the right-hand side there, that's a telltale sign. Now, not everybody gets the bullseye rash, but if you do get the bullseye rash, it's diagnostic for Lyme disease. That means you get the bullseye rash, it's 100% that you have Lyme disease. You don't need any further testing because the bullseye is diagnostic. But what other symptoms might you get? Early on, you're going to get flu-like symptoms. You're going to get the fever, the chills, the weakness, and the fatigue. Headaches are something you'd get fairly early on. The heart complications are something that you would get a little bit later on. Let's move to the next slide. So flu-like symptoms and the bullseye rash, something you get early on. If allowed to progress, you'll get joint pain, headaches, fatigue, Bell's palsy. If you look at the picture of the guy on the right-hand side there, he's got Bell's palsy, which is facial paralysis, also a very telltale sign for Lyme disease. And if you let it go beyond that, you're going to get the arthritis, the fatigue, cognitive problems, and cardiac complications. The bullseye rash, again, less than 50% of people get the rash, so you can't say, oh, I didn't get the rash, so I must be good. If you get any symptoms after the tick bite, you need to suspect that you've gotten Lyme or some other disease from the tick. But the rash itself can vary. So the classic bullseye rash looks like that picture on the upper left there. It looks like a bullseye, and the circles are expanding and uniform. It can be a large rash, like it's showing in the lower left-hand picture there. The rash may be raised or flat. It may be warm. It may be painful, painless. So it can vary considerably in the symptoms and its appearance. And there's a lot of non-common rashes that you can get also. So here's a whole slide of different kinds of rashes. They're not always circular. They're not always uniform. Sometimes they appear in different spots on the body. So any kind of a rash, even if it doesn't look like the bullseye rash, again, you should strongly consider that it's from the tick bite. Co-infections. So we talk a lot about Lyme disease. You hear a lot about Lyme disease, but many other, we call that tick nature's dirty needle, right? It can have all kind of different pathogens in it. So 53% of the patients with persistent symptoms, again, that's where you don't want to be. You don't want to be one of those people that develop persistent symptoms. You want to catch it early. 53% of those people reported co-infections, reported something other than Borrelia burgdorferi, which is Lyme disease. 30% reported 2 or more co-infections, including Babesia, Bartonella, or Ehrlichia. Being infected with Lyme with co-infections leads to a more severe outcome. So if you just caught Lyme disease, you might be, sick. But if you caught Lyme disease on top of Babesia, on top of Bartonella, you could be really, really sick, and it becomes longer to get better. So here's some other rashes. The top 2 rashes there are Bartonella, or what's known as cat scratch fever, and they look like stretch marks, although they might not be going the right direction for stretch marks. So that's one way to distinguish them from actual stretch marks. Rocky Mountain spotted fever looks like that rash in the bottom picture. And why is this important? Because you're going to your doctor, you got bit by a tick, you're having symptoms. Hopefully you're going to someone that's knowledgeable enough to say, oh, we're going to test you for Lyme, but we're also going to test you for co-infections, because they are different tests and there's different treatments. So if you go to a doctor and he's not considering testing you for all the possible different infections, then you may want to find someone that's more knowledgeable. So see your doctor if you have symptoms after that tick bite. Remember the 50% rule. 50% don't recall getting bit by a tick, and we could speculate why people don't recall being bit by a tick. It could have been one of those nymphal ticks that no one ever noticed, or who knows. And 50% do not recall a rash. So you get bit by a tick, you have symptoms, go see your doctor. So in summary, we've talked about prevention, at least Karen talked about prevention. Remember that you don't have to be out in the woods. Certainly you can be exposed to ticks out in the woods, but I believe more people get bit in their own yard than out hiking in the woods. Tick-borne diseases can have serious health consequences, including cognitive and psychiatric problems. Catching it early is your best bet to not having a devastating illness. Children are high risk, so kids might not express how they're feeling or what their symptoms are, so you got to watch out for them. And our website is www.palyme.org. You can always check there for the latest information. One other thing I would like to say, our website has all these downloads. Dare to Prevent is a download of all the different personal prevention options that are available to you. Dare to Act is what to do if you get bit by a tick. Dare to Prevent Pet is specific to pets. We get lots of questions about pets in these kinds of seminars. Dare to Prevent Yard is how to properly treat and groom your yard so that it's tick unfriendly. And finally, we have the Tick ID card, where you can identify ticks, and it's a list of the pathogens identified with each type of tick. We also have some materials on our website that are appropriate for schools, for school nurses, field trip information. And this slide has a lot of links to tick testing, repellent information. When I do these seminars in person, I always have this on hand for people to take home. I obviously can't do that today. If you want to screenshot this, maybe I can take a shot of this and put it in the comments later on and share it with you. But great links and great resources in this slide. And one last thing, we are the PA Lyme Resource Network. We have support groups across the state. I am in Pittsburgh. If you know someone that's affected by Lyme disease and needs some support, we are an email away. We are, when the coronavirus is over, we will have our in-person meetings again, so you can always stop by and see us. But right now, we're having virtual meetings. But we're here for you if you need us. And one last plug, tickencounter.org, great website for all kinds of tick information. Thank you very much. I don't have a survey for you today, but thank you.
Wonderful, Bill. Thank you so much. Wonderful. Thank you both. We did have a couple more questions during Bill's presentation. Tiffany asked if out-of-state residents could send their ticks in to ticklab.org and if there was a cost. And then we had a wonderful viewer, I think, sent them a URL. But Bill, do you know anything about if out-of-state residents could send us TickLab and if there would be a cost at all?
Yeah, I'm sure they could. I want to say the basic panel, from what I remember, what the pricing was before it was free, and that was only a few years back, is like $50 for the basic panel, and that's what I remember.
Great, yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, that link was included, so people can check that out if they're curious as well.
Okay.
And then a question for Karen: do you tick drag all over Pennsylvania? Now, is that lingo I'm not privy to?
Yeah. So tick dragging is a surveillance technique that we use to look for ticks out in the environment. It's one of the few techniques that we can actually use. They're quite hard to find, to be honest, especially the ones that we're mostly interested in, which is the black-legged tick. But yeah, we mostly focus our tick dragging in central Pennsylvania, so mostly within Center County and around Penn State, just because of the nature of our projects. But I believe the state of Pennsylvania Department of, I think DEP, is looking to do statewide surveillance. Either they have already started, if not, they're starting very soon. Yeah. And I also wanted to add something about for New York State residents. I think there is like a New York tick lab that's testing them. I think it's the Thangamani lab. If you look up, I'm trying to remember his hospital, the Upstate Medical University, and you look up like a tick lab or tick testing, I think they will be testing for New York residents for free, if you're interested in that as well. I just remembered that, so.
Great, thanks, Karen. And now I kind of had a question maybe both of you can address. We talked about Lyme disease and these other tick-borne illnesses, and it seems like they all sort of begin the same way with these flu-like symptoms. So like about how many days into feeling these symptoms, like should you go to the doctor? Like what if you just think it's a flu, and then if you take some sort of flu meds, would that alleviate your symptoms or not? And is that a telltale sign, that you got to go to the doctor? Just curious.
Would you like me to take that, Karen?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
I can think of some answers, but I'll bring it up if you don't mention it.
Okay. Well, for sure. I mean, it starts out as a flu-like symptom. For sure, if it's a tick-borne illness, it's any flu meds you take are not going to be effective. So no. Again, I'm not a medical professional, and I'm not giving medical advice, just to make that disclaimer once again. But I'll give you my opinion as a person that had Lyme disease, and when I went undiagnosed for a long time and struggled, I'll give you my opinion. I'd go to the doctor right away. If you got bit by the tick and you have flu-like symptoms, boy, that's good enough for me. That's good enough for me that you've got something. Now, it gets a little dicey only because if you have that bullseye rash, again, there's, I don't want to say you're lucky. You're lucky because you're not lucky to get it, but you're lucky to diagnose it. If you have that bullseye, then go right away. If you don't, it becomes a little dicey because if you go to your doctor and they want to test you, all those tests that they do, the Western blot, they're not effective right away because they're looking for an antibody response, and your body might not mount that antibody response for enough to be detectable by the test for a month. You don't want to wait a month. So what I would do is I'd go right away. I would again, I don't give medical advice. I would ask for prophylactic treatment, as it were. I would say, this could be serious. Let's get in front of it. Let's take a dose of antibiotics right away. That's my non-medical advice.
Sure. Thanks for that insight. All right, thank you again both to Karen and Bill for your presentations today. I do know that Karen has a survey link that would be really beneficial to her work if we could fill that out for her. So I will post that in the comments here below. And that'll stay active for a couple days. So if you're not watching live, please do still attempt to fill out the survey for her. I also want to let people know that, hold on, one quick question. We're asking for someone to provide your email addresses or a way to contact you. Do you both feel comfortable with that?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. If you actually fill out the survey, it does have my email in it.
Exactly. Yes, the survey will have that info for Karen, but we can get Bill's contact info as well, so people can reach out if they have any questions. A couple more things before we wrap up today. Wanted to let folks know that PPFF does have a tick card available, and you can reach out to Pam. Here you can see a quick preview of it. You can reach out to Pam at pmetzger@ppff.org to receive this infographic brochure in English and in Spanish. So that's great. So please do reach out to her if you'd like a tick card. And then one more thing, our next Lunch and Learn will be on Tuesday at noon, Tuesday, May 12th at noon. We will be talking to foresters at Michaud State Forest about keeping parks and forests safe for others and the current overuse that they're experiencing. So please do join us for that. All right, thank you all for being here. If you have any more questions for our guests, please keep commenting and I can reach out to them and we'll get you some answers, and we'll also provide their contact info as well. So thank you again, Karen and Bill, for your time and energy.
Thank you.
I really appreciate this great information.
Yeah, thanks for inviting us.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Right.
Bye. Bye.
Cool, we're ending.